Hello.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, so I am audible, but the original screen is not coming. I don't know why. I'm not able to see the video of others. Just a minute. Okay, that's fine. Now I am able to see. So are you beginning? Yes.
So, good morning to everyone once again. So, today we introduce today's respected speaker, Professor Sudhanshu Bhushan, who is the professor and head Department of Higher and Professional Education, National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration, New Delhi. We are all eager for your lecture, sir. So, over to you, sir, now. Professor Sudhanshu Bhushan.
Thank you very much for providing this excellent opportunity to meet the colleagues from Scottish Church College and perhaps from other institutions. First of all, I extremely regret for being late by more than half an hour because I was in some meeting and that was a very important UGC meeting, which is again considering an amendment to the 2010 regulation, which then became 2018 regulation. And so I'm sorry for that. I apologize for that. Today, my task is to understand some of the implications of the national education policy. And I will divide this whole exercise into two. The first will be what are its broader implications in terms of affiliating system, in terms of various regulatory bodies and so on. And the second part of it, I would like to devote on what are its implications for a college and particularly a teacher. So in the very first part, I would like to say that National Education Policy 2020 is envisaging a very, very big overhaul, a very, very large structural change. And when I go into the different aspects of the structural change, it will become clear whether these structural change, how much time will it take place, what are the cost implications, etc., which have not been really spelled out in the policy. So what is the idea? The idea is that policy claims that the whole architecture of knowledge which a university system should have must change as per the 21st century requirement. I mean, that I think is the basic assumption of some noise, some voice. So if you could mute, that will be fine. So the basic assumption is that we need to change to 21st century knowledge economy architecture. And what are the obstacles? The first and foremost point that is being said is that in terms of 21st century knowledge architecture, we have moved from a disciplinary base to an interdisciplinary base. So perhaps the universities of early 20th century, late 19th century Could be a universities where discipline-based institutions uh, could be really promoted or encouraged. But now the idea is that there has to be an interdisciplinary. Now, the first thing that comes under attack under this is the affiliating college university system, which we inherited in a way as from the British period and continued even in the post-colonial period. Why did we continue in the post-colonial period? There could be reasons for that, but certainly in the world, all over the country, you will certainly not find many such system of affiliating university system where there is one university administration, and then there are number of colleges affiliated to it. That was the earlier British model, but they also diverted from that model. But in India, we continued with that, perhaps because it is a cheap model. It is a model where you do not need to have an administrative machinery, a large administrative machinery at the level of the institution, that is college, but perhaps with centralized administration at the university level, colleges could be managed well. So that is how affiliating university system continued for such a long period of time. There are many reports of affiliating university system which do point out that yes, there are inefficiencies in the affiliating university system because there are uh, thousands of colleges. I mean, there are all sorts of range of the number of colleges within a university, and it becomes, in terms of governance, it becomes difficult to manage, and therefore the quality is one of the reasons. Among other reasons, could be that the quality is going down, and therefore straight away it says national education policy that there has the affiliating university system should be abolished in next 20 years. It fixes the period, the year 2040. Now, and in its place, what it is envisaging is a completely, in a way, American type of university system, which says that there should be a multidisciplinary research university or multidisciplinary teaching university or the autonomous colleges only. So there are only three types of institutions could be there, where there should be the integration of undergraduate and postgraduate. There should be an integration of all disciplines, right from education, engineering, social science, humanities, and all. So that is a big proposal for change. This may be certainly a good idea along with the 21st century knowledge economy architecture. But I have examined it, how far it is practical. So from the practical point of view, I collected information from randomly from two university systems. One from Delhi University, I collected data from All India Survey of Higher Education in terms of number of colleges, number of disciplines, number of teachers, number of students. And then I defined what is the optimal number of disciplines necessary and so on. And then I found that a restructuring of only Delhi University along the pattern of multidisciplinarity that is being demanded of by any institution, from any institution, will involve a cost of, I mean, on a very conservative estimate, rupees 5,000 crore. Just one Delhi University restructuring. I also examined Rajasthan University and found that perhaps one or two colleges have the feasibility, but most of the colleges will not be, do not have necessary infrastructure, resources, etc., to qualify as a multidisciplinary institution. Now, the implication, of course, will be that either more than half of the institutions will have to be closed down or will have to be merged with another institution. You very well know that there are maybe 15,000 to 20,000 simply education college single discipline education college, single discipline engineering college, medical college, agriculture college, and all that. So all those institutions will have to be really either closed down or will have to be restructured. Even there are many NITs and IITs which are restricted to very few disciplines. So they also need to be restructured, and at least say 20 to 30 disciplines will have to be added. So the first point that I would like to sum up, the first proposal of reform is that no disciplinary institutions will be accepted. Affiliating system has to go away, and there will be autonomous, multidisciplinary college, research university, or teaching university. Now, whole this requires a huge restructuring. I think Indian higher education system will not be really able to restructure itself in the next 20 years. Although there may be some move, there may be some initiative for some of the institutions to orient itself towards adding more and more discipline. And I think perhaps state governments will also not be ready to this proposal, because they will have to incur a lot of cost. They will have to close down many institutions, which no state government would like to. So that is the first point in terms of the large structural change. Now, the second point I would like to say is that uh, there is a huge structural transformation in terms of the governance. Now, what are those? First of all, UGC has to be abolished. UGC has been financing, has been maintaining or regulating to maintain the standards of all higher education institutions. And in the name of maintaining the standards, University Grants Commission has been issuing regulations from time to time, whether it relates to a regulation with respect to standards of MPhil, PhD, with minimum qualification of teachers, with the appointment of vice chancellors, and so on and so forth. All these regulations are in the name of maintenance of standards. And this power has been granted to UGC directly under the mandate of the Constitution of India, which says that it is the responsibility of the union government to maintain the standards of higher education. Try to understand this constitutional provision. Then that maintenance of standards of higher education is the responsibility of union government, but at the same time, the opening of institutions by legislative act, etc., may be done at the level of the state government also, and as of course as well as by the central government. So under this provision, University Grants Commission was constituted, and its main function was to maintain standards as well as to fund higher education institutions. Now, the argument against UGC, University Grants Commission, has been that it has been over-regulating, that it has not, but it is list governing. So the new motto of management is that less of government and more of governance. So under that motto, perhaps it is being thought that UGC has been over-regulating, over-governing, and that has been uh, blocked to progress of or the maintenance of standards of higher education. So in this case, the four institutions are being envisaged. One is that there will be a higher education commission of India, and that will be the apex body. And within this apex body, there will be four set of vertical institutions. One set of institution for the maintenance, for accreditation purpose, one set of institution for grant purpose, funding purpose, one set of institutions for qualifications framework, deciding the qualifications framework of institutions, and one set of institutions will be for deciding the outcome-based education. So what is the implication? The implication of this in this new framework of governance is that now, I mean, we need to understand what is the meaning of autonomy and accountability. Government seems to claim that institutions, that UGC should not over-regulate, which means what? Which means that universities and colleges need to be given more and more autonomy. But at the same time, the teachers now will have to be more and more accountable. That is the kind of understanding. Why it will have to be more accountable? Now it will have to prove itself to the accreditation agency. If it does not fare well in terms of accreditation, the institution is responsible. It will have to prove itself to a central body in terms of following the outcome-based education. Outcome-based education is, again, you people are all from, many of you are from education background, but outcome-based education is also a very recent phenomena that is emerging. In India, it has emerged last 5 to 6 years, which means that the whole graduate outcomes, program outcomes, class-based outcomes, semester-wise outcomes uh, will have to be made clear. It has to be quantified, and it is the responsibility of every faculty that those outcomes quantitatively measured, to be measured quantitatively, are met. So there is, I will call it, there is furthermore uh, accountability in terms of outcome-based education. And then for funding, there is a move towards performance-based funding, not the need-based funding. And therefore, there is further accountability, and there is a national quality. So the whole point is that are we really centralizing the governance or decentralizing the governance? If there are 4 councils which are under the control of Higher Education Commission of India, and if these councils fix external mandates to be fulfilled by each and every faculty, each and every institution, then perhaps it will lead to more and more centralization, more and more accountability. Now, in terms of autonomy, you can say that government is ready to provide some sort of a corporate-based model of governance. What does it mean? It says that there will be first it says that there will be a governing body at the level of the institution. Now, what is the meaning of this? The meaning of this is that whether the present way of governance in terms of Senate or syndicates, or in terms of the courts or the executive council that any university system has, will that continue? Will chancellor, will governor as the chancellor of various state universities continue? I do not know. Perhaps will not. If indeed the recommendation of national education policy has to be followed, it says that the supreme governing body will be the governing body at the institutional level, and this governing body will also have the power to recruit heads of the institutions, to recruit the faculty of the institution. And this governing body, it says, that will be non-political. So what is the implication? The implication, in my view, is that perhaps the idea is that in the name of being non-political or apolitical, the whole idea is that the institutions are the state government will have a less and less responsibility towards owning those institutions, because if the university bodies represent in courts or in senate, there is a represent, or in syndicate or or executive council, there is a representative of the state government, and in many ways the ownership of that institution also is shared not only by academics but also by the state government. But if the state governments have nothing to do with the institution, then what will be its implication? The implication will be that perhaps state government will also tell one day that the finance will also not be the responsibility of the state government. So it means that only at the level of institutions, academic autonomy, administrative autonomy, and along with this financial autonomy will have to be maintained. And traditionally, we all know that 19th century, 20th century, etc., have been period where the basic philosophy has been that education is the responsibility of the state government. And it is within that state government's patronage that academics or academic institutions will generate knowledge for the good of the society. But now, with this kind of a change in the governance, perhaps the or with the financial autonomy in the hands of the institutions, there may be move towards more and more marketization, more and more resource mobilization from market, which means from students, and which means a lot of restructuring, which means restructuring in terms of curriculum, because now curriculum will have to be oriented towards the market or the needs or the consumer needs. So it is not the teacher sovereignty, but it is the sovereignty of the consumer or the students which will prevail. So we need to understand this particular move, where on the one hand there is a centralization in terms of proving the accountability to different councils. On the other hand, there is an autonomy at the level of institutions. This autonomy may mean a withdrawal of public funding, and also the with and also uh, a move towards the marketization, which will have a very serious implication in terms of whole curricular structuring, in terms of employability type of curricula, and shift from knowledge to skill development, to vocational oriented course development. Of course, this shift is not only unique to India, but it is happening all over the world. In 1992, there was a bifurcation in the British universities. The universities were different from the polytechnics or the colleges, and polytechnics had no power to grant a degree. Only universities had the power. Polytechnics were granting all sorts of diploma. Now, this kind of a bifurcation was abolished in 1992, meaning thereby that vocationally oriented institutions as well as knowledge oriented universities both are put on the at par, both are put on the same academic platform. So this kind of a re-engineering of higher education will make a move towards vocational from from knowledge to skill development. Now, of course, we academics can certainly discuss this at great length. We may say that perhaps with the new generation of students joining our educational institutions in last 30 years or 20 years, or one move towards mass higher education, there has been an emerging, increasing demand for that kind of a vocational education. So what shall be a mix of in a curricula of education component and practical, skill oriented, vocational oriented course? That in fact uh, is a big challenge, on which I will come again a little later. Here suffice it to point out that the second kind of structural change that is being talked about is in terms of centralization and a move towards autonomy. But this autonomy is different from the autonomy that was being given to the universities in 19th century and 20th century. This autonomy is a move towards more and more marketization, more and more private oriented education. And of course, therefore, along with this is also the the recommendation for an institutional development plan, IDP. So institutional development plan will be a plan for 5 years or 10 years, where an institutions will be asked to restructure itself so as to move towards various recommendations or various directions that national education policy is envisaged. So institutional development plan is again going to be an important component of any institution, college or the university. So that is my point number two. That whole model of governance, you can say in a new language, that it is moving towards new managerialism. It is moving towards management principles, which is guided by the market principles, which is guided by the efficiency principle, and therefore the social and the equity aspect of the whole governance may suffer. So that, I think, is the third important point that we need to understand. Uh, the third, important. So I call it, the first is at level of university, restructuring, abolition of university system, moving towards multidisciplinarity, and under which the assumption is that the knowledge is a function now of various disciplines coming together. Now, again, there may be a debate on this, how far disciplinary knowledge should be retained in the university, and how far the mix of different disciplines should be retained in the curriculum. So and the second is at the level of the governance structure. Third, I think, very important restructuring that is being suggested is at the level of pedagogy. Now, what is this restructuring? This restructuring says that now there could be 1 year certificate course, 1 year, 2 year diploma course, 3 year undergraduate course, and 4 year undergraduate research program. So all sorts of flexibility. Now, as I said, that in a new form of governance, flexibility or free choice is becoming a buzzword. Free choice, you need to give students as much choices as possible, as much freedom to opt a course as possible. And therefore, under this thinking, there is a recommendation that there will be all sorts of 1 year certificate, 2 year diploma, and 3 and 4 year undergraduate. There will be 1 year postgraduate, 2 year postgraduate. There will be no MPhil and only PhD. Now, it is easier said than done. What will be its, and along with this is the idea of multiple entry and exit. That means students can enter into the system and have certificate course, and then after certificate course can make a transition to the world of work. After 5 years or 3 years, they can again come back and acquire advanced knowledge, the diploma or the degree. And in this manner, the choices of students, it is being said, that will be much higher. What will be the implication of this? That all of us need to understand very well. The implication of this will be a complete curricular overhauling. How will you make a curriculum? There are two ways. One way will be that there is a curricula for certificate course only 1 year. You will admit students for 1 year and then it ends. Or there will be a curricula for 2 year diploma. You will admit the students for 2 year diploma and then students will complete the course, and so on. That is one pathway. The second pathway will be that the curricular structure is such that if a student decides to exit after 1 year, they can exit with certificate of 1 year, or they can continue for second year, and then again they can decide whether they will try to leave the diploma or continue for a 3-year undergraduate. Now, how to design such a curricula is very, very difficult because the experience of 4-year undergraduate that was introduced in Delhi University says that it was first of all experimented in a hurry, and teachers did not have sufficient time to think of that kind of a curricular structure. So that I think is a challenge because the students, good students want high level of theoretical knowledge within the first year. But if you have to give a certificate course, there will be a class because under the certificate course, there will be an attempt to provide more and more communicative skill there is, and all sorts of soft skill. So there will be a clash. One type of students will like to have very advanced course. Another type of students will not like to have advanced course. They will like to learn more and more skill. So between the theory-oriented knowledge-based course and between the vocational or training-oriented course, there will be a class, and how uh, the curricula will be made will become a challenge. There is also an argument that the mobility of students need to be promoted. In fact, under the credit transfer system, I mean, there are two provisions. One is academic bank of credit has been created, or in fact, there is a plan to introduce an academic bank of credit. What is this academic bank of credit? Academic bank of credit was only experimented in country like Korea, and there is no such academic bank of credit anywhere in the world. But this new innovation comes in Indian higher education, which says that wherever in educational institutions you accumulate credit, those accumulated credit will be deposited in a bank, and this bank will take into account your lifelong education, where whenever, not only uh, during the period of your young period of between 18 to 25 years of age, accumulation of trade, but also at a later stage, at the age of 40 years, 45 years. So whole an attempt is to also integrate the lifelong education, what is called further education in UK context, will have to be integrated. So there is one move towards academic bank of credit, so that the whole idea is that we begin to learn, or we continue to learn throughout our life. And then the second thing is that the there is a national credit framework, and in fact we have been asked to prepare that document, and we submitted it to ministry a month or a couple of months ago, where the whole idea is that there should be the possibility of credit transfer from one institution to another, which should allow the student to move from one institution to another. So maybe that a Scottish Church College may provide training or education to the students for 2 years, but for one semester or 2 semesters, the students or some students may want to move to residency or may want to move to any other college in India. So that kind of a flexibility should be provided. Credit transfer should be provided to the students. So the whole idea is that, I mean, at the core of it, you will find that there is so much of emphasis on the free choice, flexibility of curriculum, transfer of students, and so on. Now, if you really pick up all those terms, you will find that, and of course, free choice from skill-based education, from knowledge-based education to skill-based education. So all this means what? All this means I mean, one should look at the whole issue at a much deeper level. And understanding at the deeper level shows that there is a move towards basically shift towards what? Towards higher education as more consumer oriented uh, enterprise, where learners or students are sovereign. We have to be guided by the choices of the students rather than the teachers determining curriculum autonomously, responsibly for the sake of knowledge creation and also, of course, for the sake of skill creation. So that kind of an autonomy, which is or the freedom that a teacher ought to have, perhaps get loosened or perhaps is taken away from teacher. So from that point of view also you will find. Now again there has been much emphasis on a mix of curriculum in the sense that the humanities, the arts and sciences, it says that there has to be an integration. Now, what does that integration mean? Does that mean that we are moving away from a specialized education, from a specialist to generalist? Could we have, for example, at the present level, at the undergraduate level, there is a UGC curriculum which says that certain number of credits, say 8 credits, will be compulsory for skill and so on, and then perhaps 92 credit or 112 credit is necessary for the discipline in which a person is specializing, and then there will be few credit for from interdisciplinary. Now, as per the National Education Policy 2020, it seems that it is going to be further, I mean, liquidated in the sense that the emphasis from specialized education, say 112 credit given to a discipline in which knowledge acquisition should take place for having some mastery or specialization in that particular subject, will perhaps be no longer there. As per National Education Policy 2020, it says that there is no boundary between all these curricular and extracurricular, between the arts and the social sciences and the humanities and so on and so forth. So again, this will have an implication. Uh, then in terms of assessment, there is a move towards continuous assessment and a student based on learning goals. That I think is very important. Continuous assessment to some degree has already been introduced in the universities and colleges when there was a move from year-long education or year-long examination system to a semester-based examination, and within semester, certain percentage was under internal evaluation, and that internal evaluation was some sort of a continuous assessment that has already been introduced. But what is important is that the learning goals based assessment, which means that if we divide our learning in terms of higher cognition learning and lower cognition learning, and in terms of various taxonomies of learning, then we need to assess students along different levels of learning requirements. So as per the new education policy, the whole assessment, there has to be a move towards more scientific assessment. Of course, those who are from education department may be aware of various researches in assessment, in pedagogy, curricular planning, and so on. But suppose if someone is a student from economics or from physics, then it is expected that all different faculties from different disciplines should also be aware about what kind of an assessment, scientific assessment system should be in place. So whole curricular changes, pedagogic changes, and assessment system is moving towards, is centering towards more and more, centered towards more and more needs of the students, needs of the learners. So there is a shift from teacher-based system to a learner-based system. Many of you educationists will perhaps certainly might favor this, might favor uh, different methods of teaching and learning, which is scientific, and it should be promoted. But it has a huge implication in terms of other discipline-based teachers, which means that a very large number of training uh, will have to be given to other subject-based teachers in order to understand the nuances, the deeper nuances of the changes at the level of the pedagogy. Now, there are various other type of reforms that are being suggested. First is at the level of the research. So you might have heard National Research Foundation is being suggested. It is said, there is a commitment of very large funding through the National Research Foundation. It is said that ICSSR and all those such research-based institutions will not be abolished, or for example, philosophical research or historical research will not be abolished, but there will be a National Research Foundation which will be given the responsibility. Now, National Research Foundation also have been given a very big mandate in order to promote research. But the whole idea is that research perhaps will move from more and more need-based to an impact-based assessment system. Now, this point again may be debated amongst the academia. What do we mean by impact-based assessment? In social sciences, for example, can the impact be felt in a short manner in order to evaluate research? Because research is a very long process. So perhaps there may be a move from fundamental research to more and more applied research, because wherever research impact becomes a crucial factor for the funding of the research, then the research impact cannot be really felt for a foundational knowledge, for fundamental knowledge. Only maybe applied kind of knowledge. So there may be also, the whole indication from this is that there may be a move from the fundamental kind of work to more and more applied based.
Hello, Bishada, Sumonda.
May I continue?
Yes, sir, please.
Okay. So, what does it mean? It means, if I could summarize everything, there are many more aspects. But if I could summarize it, the new directions of higher education reform, then I will summarize it in the following functional form, which certainly has may not explain everything, but in a very succinct manner, it may give some indication. So the quality is a function. First of all, quality has a very instrumental meaning in this, and rather than the intrinsic meaning. So that I think is important. And quality is a function of first multidisciplinarity. Quality is a function of the choice of students. Quality is a function of education-based education. It is a function of accreditation. It is a function of impactful research. function of good governance, and community engagement and learner centeredness. Now, all these are very, very, very beautiful terms, no doubt. If the multidisciplinarity, the choice of a student's outcome, accreditation, impactful research, good governance, etc., are taken into account, certainly it will lead to an improvement in the quality. But the, I mean, I mean, the first point I would like to say is that it also shows an indication towards the reform process, to the direction of reform process in a completely different direction that we need to read between the lines of the national education policy, because otherwise it will be very difficult to assess the national education policy, because it says everything. It says that no public funding will be assured. It says that recruitment of the teachers will be assured. Uh, there will be no shortage of teachers. So there are all good words. But you will be able to understand between these words only when we understand what is the deeper uh, meaning of all this education reform. And as I said, that the deeper meaning of this is may emerge in terms of the less and less funding responsibility of the state. Because what is the meaning of autonomy? It is not the academic autonomy. It is also the financial autonomy. Autonomy always means, in a traditional sense, autonomy in matters of admission, autonomy in matters of designing the curricula, academy in matters of teaching, and so on. But the funding responsibility has to be that of the government. That has been the understanding of the higher education or the university system so far. But if the funding responsibility of the state is shifted from government to the institutional level, then this autonomy has a much deeper meaning in terms of orienting your institution, meeting the demands of the learners, orienting the needs of the orienting toward the needs of learners and the whole curricular change in order to meet the learners' needs. So this deeper aspect of the reform, I think, is quite important if we want to understand the directions of reform. Now, as against this, the whole structural problems, the whole structural deficiency from which higher education institutions suffer, that has not been, that there has not been a true intention to address that and to say clearly that these are the terms under which the shortage of teachers will be addressed. So, I mean, it has all been left to the state government. Even the central government has not been able to fill up the vacancies in centrally funded educational institutions. Even state governments, and you know very well than I know, even I do not know what is the percentage of vacancy in Scottish Church College, but in many colleges, it is hovering around 50%, 60%. So with such a large shortage of teachers, how is it possible to make any directions of reform that the policy is just? So what I'm saying is that uh, the 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 issues are not addressed at the level of an institution, at the level of the structural deficiency and shortages at the level of the institution. Now, then how will any teacher perform? The new, because a teacher has all sorts of responsibilities. There is a shortage of teachers, so a teacher has to take, instead of 2 classes, 5 classes, 4 classes. A teacher will have to prove in terms of research. You will not be given promotion under the if you do not fulfill the API criteria. And then a teacher has also to perform the role of the management. So teacher is being reduced as it from teacher to manager. Teacher has to manage all sorts of functions and still prove itself to be heroic in terms of a, a man called teacher who is teaching, who is researching, who is managing, who is doing all sorts of things. Now, therefore, there is too much of expectations from a teacher, and it is, and there are few words which are coming. If you really deconstruct the meaning of leadership, innovations, these terms are coming up nowadays. What is the meaning of innovation? The meaning of innovation is that out of the necessity, out of the compulsion, you have to create new idea, and that new idea should provide a solution to whatever problems you are confronting, which means that both leadership and innovation has to come out of one individual agentic change, which could fulfill the promises which are being made under NEP. So what does it mean? If you look at in terms of a structure and agency, you will note that while in terms of a structure, there is a move towards a different kind of a structure, and the existing structures deficiency. A different kind of a structure means market-led way change in the structure. On the other hand, the shortage, the deficiency, the weaknesses of the institutions at the level of structure is not being addressed, and then there is too much expectation from the agency, of a teacher, from the agency of the principal, from the agency of the vice chancellor. And the expectation is that you have to prove yourself in terms of leadership. We are ready to provide leadership training. In fact, there has been much more leadership training in the last 2-3 years. So through training, you evolve into an agency where you are able to be an effective leader and be an effective innovator, so that you are able to solve the problems. So that kind of a role is being envisaged. So there is whole emphasis on psychological impulses, in the sense that motivation. You need to have high degree of motivation to work in a difficult circumstances and sort out the problem of higher education. So that is how the directions of reform of higher education seem to be. There is, therefore, I would like to divide in terms of two, the whole idea of change. One, of course, is at the level of the structure, institutions, at the macro level in terms of governance, in terms of various councils and commissions. And on the other hand, there is also much that is expected at the level of an agency, at the level of a teacher. That is to say that your leadership and your innovation, your innovative capacity should be such that you should have a curricula, a pedagogy, a new pedagogy, which could address the demands of a new generation of students who are who want an education, a different kind of education from knowledge-based to skill-based education. Well, I would like to stop at this point. I might have missed few points, but I would like to stop at this point, and I would prefer if there are discussions, that will be much better. That's all from my side so far. I think there are many questions in the chat box.
Yes, sir. There are so many questions here. I'm going to read one by one. Okay, so first question is from Orjog Day, Mathematics Department, Scottish Church College. His question is, I am last year graduation student. If NEP is going to be implemented in the middle of my upcoming master's course, then how would I feel its effect?
So is last year postgraduate or undergraduate?
He is, sir, he is,
Last year postgraduate student.
no, sir. He is last year graduation student. He is
Okay.
going to master's. Yes.
No, at the level of implementation, there will always be a scope. I mean, for giving time. So there will be a clause in all sorts of changes that are taking place. There will be a clause that this will be applicable after 2 years, after 1 year. So there may be, however, I do not deny, there may be a problem of transition. I call it the problem of transition. For example, I am a last year undergraduate student, and now your university is deciding that there will be a 4-year undergraduate program. So this 4-year undergraduate program may begin after 1 year or 2 years. So there should be sufficient clauses which take care of the problem or cost of transition period. That's how I think such students will have that kind of a leverage, that kind of a space.
Okay. So shall I move to second question, sir?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So next question is from Polomi Baur. We currently spend 4.6% of GDP. If we actually spend 6% of the GDP as mentioned in the BEP 2020, will the transition from unidisciplinary to interdisciplinary structure be less time taking?
Well, I think if you look at the recent data, then the whole then the percentage that you have mentioned, or that may be mentioned in the document also, is much less than 4%. In fact, it will be around 3.50% only. Now, so this is the for at all levels of education, elementary, secondary, higher education. So it is very difficult to say. I mean, I do not know that. First of all, 6% transition, 6% of GDP, that commitment cannot come overnight. That will take at least 10 years or 5 years or 10 years at the most. So if within 10 years, if there is a commitment of the government to fund education, then certainly I think much of the problem will be sorted out. The transition will be certainly uh, much less painful, and it may take less time. But there are many areas in which transition will have to be a long-term process. Even if you give full amount, full commitment of funding, you cannot abolish the affiliating university system. It will take, in my uh, view, it will take another 50 years, another 100 years, rather than 20 years as envisaged in the national education policy. So certainly if government needs to give that kind of a promise that there will be a jump of educational expenditure, at present does not seem to be any such commitment. But most welcome if the 6% of GDP is spent in next 5 to 10 years, then certainly transition from unit discipline to multidisciplinary will be much easier. Certainly, I agree with you.
Okay, so next question is from Shudipta Shrudipta Chatterjee. Learning growth of students could be graphically plotted and could not be given to students at the month end. But my question is how the weakness of a student could be addressed at higher education institutions.
Okay. So this is a very big question. Every teacher should make as much possible an effort to plot the learning growth. But plotting of the learning growth is not an easy thing. At most, you make an assessment test, and through the assessment test, you can plot the achievement or the learning of the student. So that kind of idea is certainly a well taken idea. But this, what is big question is how do you address the weakness of the students? See, I conducted at an all India level a students satisfaction survey, which is available on the website, and it is also available on the MHRD website. It is called a students satisfaction survey. And the central message of a student satisfaction survey was that there are new type of first generation learners. In fact, in my calculation, it turned out to be roughly 45-46% of students in Indian higher education institutions who are the first generation learners. Now, first generation learners come up with cognitive deficit, cultural deficit, communication deficit, psychological deficits, all sorts of deficit into the higher education institutions. Now, how to address those deficits, I think, should remain one of the challenges of every college. Gone are the days when maybe 40 years ago, you will get the entry of students who are all, good students. But now you will find the students who enter into the higher. I do not know if Scottish Church College and other colleges may have a competitive test. So meritorious students might be coming. But there are many colleges where meritorious students are not coming because there is no such competitive testing system. So their first generation learners are coming in a big way. Every college should make a very conscious plan how to address the deficiencies, as I noted, all sorts of deficiency at the beginning of their entrance. There should be a plan for 6 months, for 3 months, for 1 year, if possible, so that you address the deficit. I know one of the quotations from famous sociologist Andre Bethe. Andre Bethe is writing that so far as higher education institution is concerned, we should not provide entry to those who are less meritorious. That is his point of view. You may disagree, I may disagree. The fact of the matter is that we are providing an entry even to the less meritorious students under the affirmative action policy. So my suggestion will be that at the college level, there should be a plan for 6 months to address, to first of all identify what those deficiencies are, and then to sort out those deficiencies. There is some noise coming up from, please mute yourself. Thank you. So now, and then in that survey, I also note. So my first solution to address the weakness is a college plan to address those students. My second suggestion is that we need to be much more, we need to provide all sorts of course materials, video materials to students, because 1 hour lecturing method is now being not accepted by the students. They feel it highly mechanical and boring. So you can provide all sorts of tutorials, all sorts of videos, we need to develop much more engagement with the students. And we need also to motivate the students. We need to treat students with dignity. I will tell you one story where I went to Jammu in one of the college, and the students said that we are not treated with the less meritorious students are not treated with dignity. They are considered as inferiors. And one of them said that ye kya judge lagenge? Will they become a judge? That we should really work so hard for them because they are inherently so weak that they cannot achieve anything. So that kind of a treatment really does not go well with the students. So to be precise, I will say that students' motivation, one has to work at the level of students' motivation, increasing engagement, tutorials, video materials, and plan at the college level to address the deficiencies.
Okay. The next question is from Bipasha. What provision or revision does NEP 2020 give with reference to inclusive education? Hello.
So far as, yes, I've got the point.
Okay, sir.
See, I mean, let us also try to understand this debate. The debate sometimes is that there is a trade-off between quality and equity, between efficiency and the equity. But researchers have shown that on a long, if at over a period of say 40 years or 50 years, then you will find that the greater and greater inclusion of students in the higher education institutions have opened the horizon of opportunity for more and more number of people. And our economy and our society has benefited with more and more inclusion of the students in the long run. In the short run, it might seem that there is an efficiency equity trade-off because if there are 40 seats and if 10 seats are reserved and 10 seats come presumably by less meritorious students, that to that extent merit is compromised. So if you give emphasis on equity, then merit is compromised. But on the other hand, if you look at the mass higher education, then the opportunities that higher education institutions have provided to more and more rural students, girls students, and so on, that has broadened the horizon of opportunity for the students. Therefore, I think inclusive education looked at from a long-term point of view is not antithetical to quality. So, but I think you also agree that inclusive education is needed. Why I am emphasizing this point is that many principals, many faculty, many people feel that inclusion goes against quality. So there has to be an effort towards inclusive education. Now, so far as NEP 2020 is concerned, you will find that on equity, there are 10 points which are being said. So that there should be more and more scholarship, that there should be all sorts of mentoring and all sorts of support to the students, both by central government, the state government, and so on. But you see, this looks like, I mean, much more verbal rather than showing any real commitment. If real commitment will emerge, then the document itself and subsequent action itself shows that yes, there will be a more allocation towards fulfilling the dream of inclusive education in terms of girls' hostel facility, in terms of scholarship, in terms of all other incentives, whether in terms of books and so on and so forth. But that kind of a commitment I am not finding in national education policy. Having said that, I think what can be done at the institutional level is maybe a small effort. Small effort may be made that you treat the students, you make an inclusive culture within an institution. Do not make your higher education institution an elite institution. Make an inclusive culture where the students from different caste, religion, uh, sex, gender should be appreciated, should be welcome, and create an atmosphere where they do not remain in silos, they do not remain in groups, but they remain in a very close knit group. I think if we make, and which does not cost any money. So, because if one is following, an institution is following a reservation policy, then there is enough scope that, I mean, now we follow reservation policy 50%, then 10% weaker section, then 3% physically handicapped. So there's a lot of reservation, and therefore a lot of students from different backgrounds are coming up. But they are posing a challenge also. So my point is that, and no principal, no individual can address all the challenges. Let me tell you, because at the level of institution, there is so much of problem in terms of teachers and infrastructure and so on. But some of the things which can be done is the culture, the inclusive culture, more and more extracurricular activities, and the participation of students from all groups in those extracurricular activities, mentoring, tutoring, giving a special class for, there must be language lab in your institution so that the students having difficulty in language, they should be able to address the language deficiency. So if all these measures are indeed met, then I think inclusive education will flourish, and will flourish for the good. Anything else?
Okay, sir. Yes, sir. We have
Yes.
2 or 3 questions maximum, sir. Um, so this is from Bipulon Gayan. Sir, will the commercialization of education will help a developing nation where money is becoming more qualifying criteria than of intelligence in private educational institutions?
Yeah, I agree that commercialization of education, or the technical term for this is commodification of higher education, will certainly not make a nation strong. The nation building will suffer, because wherever private universities and self-financing courses have been opened, you will find that they are restricted to very few disciplines: engineering, medical, management, economics. And I have myself tabulated the result from All India Survey of Higher Education, where I found that many private universities, I do not remember the exact percentage, but there are many private universities which are only restricted to 1 or 2 disciplines. The area studies, etc., you will not find in many uh, private universities. So there will be a very focus on a very narrow range of disciplines and the subjects. Certainly, a nation building demands the knowledge across all the disciplines, social sciences, humanities, etc. So I fully agree that if there is a commodification of higher education, the development of a nation will certainly be in danger. It will be much more fragmented development.
Okay, sir. Uh, maybe this is the last question from Anju Kalita. Sir, policy has not mentioned about AMID program. What will be the future of those teachers working in AMID programs?
I have not specifically looked at the MED, what NEP talk about MED program. Of course, at the bachelor's level, it says 4-year teacher education program. And during COVID period, kind of a transition has been exempted also, or has been extended for some more time. Maybe that it says, I'm not very sure, but maybe that it also expects the 1-year MEd or 2-year MEd, just as it says that there can be 1-year post-graduation, 2-year post-graduation in any of the disciplines. So it maybe implicitly, it implies that there may be 1-year MEd or 2-year MEd, both. Because if there is a 4-year BEd, then there could be 1-year MEd or 2-year MEd. So, but I am not sure what exactly NEP is talking about, and what will be the future scenario in terms of master's level education.
Please unmute yourself, Shreya, please.
Again muted. Shreya D.
Now am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you're out.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful session and the question and answer session also. Today, if participants have more questions, if you give permission, sir, they can interact with you via mail.
Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely all right.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Now I would request our respected professor, Chandrima Mitra madam, to lead us into vote of thanks. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shreya. Thank you, sir, for your wonderful deliberation. And we are really grateful for your speaking. Now to the official vote of thanks. Honorable Professor Sudhanshu Bhushan, respected Principal Dr. Madhumanjari Mondal, Vice Principal Dr. Supratim Das, and of course, our Secretary of the College Council, Dr. Mukherjee, our most valuable guests and participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to offer the vote of thanks on behalf of Scottish Church College, Department of Teacher Education. Firstly, I would like to express our sincere thanks to Professor Sudhanshu Bhushan, Head of the Department of Higher and Professional Education, National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration, New Delhi, for giving an excellent coverage to issues and challenges of implementation in higher education in the light of the National Education Policy 2020. Sir, we are indebted to your valuable lecture, and especially, sir, thank you for the way you asked us to look in between the lines to get the right direction for quality, equity, access, and of course, nation building. Thank you, sir. I would like to take this opportunity to record our heartfelt thanks to our patrons, Dr. Shapon Kumar Mukherjee, Secretary, College Council, Dr. Madhumanjari Mondal, our principal, our vice principal, Dr. Supratim Das. thank you for your dynamic leadership. Since an event cannot happen it cannot happen overnight. It requires planning and a bird's eye for details. We are fortunate to have the support of our joint conveners, Dr. Shamrat Bhattacharya, our IQAC coordinator, and Dr. Shushmita Ghosh, our HOD. I thank them for their motivation and dedication. I would like to acknowledge our gratitude to our colleagues, Sushobhan Pal, Department of Physics, Moumita Banerjee and Nivedita Shaha, Department of Computer Science, for the technical assistance they have provided to make this webinar a success. Thanks is due to Shreya Sen for chanting the slok and hosting the program, and also to Anuradha Gupta for introducing our esteemed speaker. I cannot thank everyone for their participation and their willingness to attend the webinar. We thank you for being with us, everybody. It was a great pleasure. Thank you very much. Shreya, please take up.
Thank you so much, madam. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So now I can log off?
Thank you, sir.
Yes, yes, sir.
Oh,
Thank you, sir.
thank you. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank